Second evening of Fire 1,000 Poems. Oh. Oh. Good evening and welcome to the second evening of Fire 1,000 Poems. Today we have a very important part of the happening. We are staging a political discussion with activists and photographers led by Tim Blank, former member of the US Armed Resistance, former political prisoner, and artist. He's going to be introducing the photographers and activists in a second. And Tim, the word is yours.
Hello there. I'm very happy to be here today with a number of just wonderful, beautiful people, accomplished activists, photographers, artists, members of what we could call the artistic resistance. We were just looking at some photographs by two photographers, Denise Bro and her son Rowan Bro, who were participants and artists in the Black Lives Matter-led demonstrations in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd. Denise and Rowan are both here with us today, and also with us are Akinyele Umoja, who is currently on the faculty of Georgia State University out of Atlanta, is one of the co-founders of the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and he is the author of We Will Shoot Back, a study of Black freedom fighters and resistance in the civil rights movement. Also with us is Jamal Joseph, who is a dear friend of mine, and actually I was in prison with Jamal at Leavenworth. He is indescribable. His accomplishments and the number of things he does include acting, and he teaches film at Columbia University. He's a Black Panther veteran, godfather to Tupac Shakur, among many, many other things, but a dear, blessed friend, and I'm really happy to have him with us. And also with us is another dear friend of mine, Jihad Abdul Mumit, who is coming to us from Virginia. And it's the first time I've laid eyes on Jamal, on Jihad under any circumstances for years and years. Being on parole, you're not allowed to do things like this. So this is really just a beautiful thing to see you, Jihad, and to be with you. Jihad is another Black Panther BLA veteran and is one of the founders of the National Jericho Movement, which is an organization dedicated to freeing U.S. political prisoners. And we are in such beautiful, blessed company this morning, this day, and I'm so happy to have you all here. I wanted to first just address Denise and Rowan, who were responsible for these photographs, and was actually the genesis of this particular part of our Fire 1000 Poems happening. I had seen some of Rowan's photographs on Facebook, of all places, and I teach history of photography and teach photography in college, and his images uh, captured my attention immediately. It wasn't just cell phone shots. It was just, there was something extraordinary going on there, and it had a real artistic and a photographic eye, but not in the sense of like trying to aestheticize something horrible. It was like there was an activist core to it and an activist presence to it that was about being a witness participant, a witness artist, and being, in the struggle in a deep way. And I think it's showed some of the best of what art can do in these situations. So that then I found out through Rowan that his mom was there too, and Denise is actually a professional photographer. And so some of these things started to make sense, and then I saw Denise's images, and we also have Ray, who is their cousin. She has images as part of the show as well. So I would love to address each of you, but maybe we can open up things a little bit. But I wanted to start with Denise and Rowan. If you could talk about the experience, maybe start with you, Rowan. Talk about the experience of being in Minneapolis with the George Floyd protests as someone with a camera, and your perspective as an artist, photographer, protester in the middle of that important event.
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting because something kind of like you were saying earlier. I mean, I wasn't, out there specifically to um, make a huge difference. I wasn't out there specifically thinking of photojournalism. And I'm glad that my mom's on this call with me because we went down specifically to the first protest without really knowing, obviously, without knowing what it all would become. Um, so for me personally, I mean, I was in Minneapolis for about 3 years, moved from the West Coast, and it was kind of one of the first things I did when I moved there was actually go to a Black Lives Matter protest, which I'm actually just remembering now. So it's in a way an interesting way to tie everything together of my life being in the Midwest. But specifically for the pictures, in my role in activism, it's funny because I don't really consider myself an activist. I was laughing. I was talking to my fiance last night, and I actually just feel like I'm just as much of an activist at my little Ace Hardware in Washington, promoting mask wearing as I was on the streets in Minneapolis. Um, but yeah, I just think it's being out on the streets, being in the middle of all the fires and everything. It was just a real perspective as opposed to what you were seeing on national media, and I think that was my main instigating factor for taking the photos, is just to have a different perspective. Originally, just for friends and family back on the West Coast, but luckily, you came across them, so they are being shared more, world around, I guess.
Hmm. Well, your images are extraordinary, and your eye is sharp. And the thing that was striking, I think, also, and I think this was true in Denise's images, were the shots that showed the real humanity, the real connection between people. And I think this is what art does at its best: is elaborate and explore the connections between each other. And Denise, would you like to talk about your point of view and your perspective as an artist in the middle of this?
Sure. First, I want to say that as a teenager in the 60s, I loved my Black Panthers. So I am so stoked to be in your presence, fellas. Um, and that was just the 60s. That was just about when I went to put myself in a self-induced coma politically for decades until really this summer. I was just so jaded by what was happening in the 60s. And I pretty much just didn't want anything to do with the circus. And so, but then come along last May, the end of last May, and my son here, Rowan, as he said, we really didn't know what even, well, nobody knew what was going to unfold, but we didn't even know what the protest or, protest, we didn't know what we were doing. Right, Rowan? We just knew of a location people were going and we went. I didn't bring my camera. I don't generally, I'm not a photographer that carries the camera around. It's burdensome. I've taken so many pictures over these decades that I don't just shoot to be shooting. So I took a few pictures with my cell phone too. And then I think on the second night of protests, or the second day, is when I decided to bring both my cameras. And I, like Rowan, I wouldn't consider myself an activist. My activism, I think, was in my home and the boys I raised. I figured I could have more impact on my kids and how they were going to have an impact on the world. That's what I did. That was my activism, was at home. So anyway, back to the photographs. I often, one reason why I don't like to have the camera with me is because I'm not really present in the activity or the event if I'm behind the camera. However, I love to take pictures. I especially love taking pictures of people, whether they're formal portraits or out in the streets. Uh, and I think I love to take pictures of people more than, I have plenty of landscapes and flowers, but those are static. And pretty much anybody can come and take the same picture of the mountain or the flower and get the same, kind of the same thing, maybe a little bit different perspective. But people are always moving, their expressions are changing. So that was, and I often don't see what I was photographing until I look at the pictures later. And as far as bearing witness goes, I feel like I'm bearing witness because I'm a body that can be counted as a movement here, but and I am there bearing witness with everybody else, but I actually don't witness what I was witnessing until I look at the pictures, and then I see a lot of things I didn't see at the time of taking the photographs. And and I had no idea where I had no goal or aim in mind when taking the photographs. I usually don't. So
I think we both were actually talking about that one day, Mom. One day we were deciding to go out. We were kind of you were debating if you wanted to bring your camera or not. I hope not to interrupt, but something that you just said reminded me that a big reason why originally going out and taking pictures or going out for these protests in general, I guess you wouldn't be able to visually see, but I'm adopted. And so it was really hard for me to really understand where my voice was appropriate in this movement. And that was another instigating factor where I thought my photographs were a way for me that was a way that I thought I could share my voice in the position that I was in, which may not make sense because I'm a Black man in America, but I am still figuring out what my adjacent white privilege growing up means to in consideration of being a Black man in America right now. And these pictures, even though I look at them, every day now, they kind of reaffirm and remind me that my voice has a place, even that place is maybe not traditional as of yet. But just a small interjection there.
Well, I was going to ask Akanyele, would you like to comment on this? Because I know that in your movement and in your life, the family is at the center of your concept of resistance and of how we're going to do this. If you want to unmute your microphone, if you could maybe address some of the things Rowan and Denise are talking about. This is, if you've seen some of their photographs, the concentration on that connection between people at these demonstrations was, to me, the most compelling part of it.
Just thinking, when both of them commented that they weren't activists. And sometimes I think we create a dichotomy that's not real. Denise said that her activism was through raising these sons, right? And so she must have implanted something for Rowan to want to go and capture these images. I claim to be a historian, and what they did was document our history. Those images are important in terms of telling the story in a way that, as Rowan said, is not captured by CNN or MSNBC, Lord knows by Fox, So they both had the sensitivity and the motivation to do that. And I think what Tim is getting to, when I joined the movement when I was 17, 18 years old in California. And the collective I was a part of, we had this slogan: "The family is a unit of struggle." The family is a unit of struggle. And so I think you all, even and Rowan saying he's adopted, but our families look different. They ain't no cookie cutter model of what the family is or what the Black experience is, right? And so I think this is one example of a household working together to document our story, which is a tremendous part of us being able to continue a movement and continue struggle. And just in me seeing the images, I saw certain things, and I don't know how intentional they were in capturing them, but hopefully we could get to that later on. But just in you being there and being present and deciding to do this, I think is an important act and helps us continue. And then the fact that you all did this in relationship with each other is very powerful.
Very much so. This I would then turn over to Jamal and Jihad, who both of you I remember discovering and encouraging theater in Leavenworth, and Jihad was writing plays, and I was lucky to be a part of a play that he wrote and that we put on and produced together for population and the penitentiary at Lewisburg about HIV and AIDS awareness, part of a group that we started there. And I know that Jamal then got his start as a filmmaker, a dramaturg, as a theater person, and as a professor. I think we all three of us got our start as artists in a penitentiary, which is an extraordinary thing. But it makes to me a lot of sense, because some of the techs who are walking around the backstage in this theater in Munich are wearing on their T-shirts a quote from James Baldwin, one of my very favorite writers. It says, "Artists are here to disturb the peace." and thinking about today here, this is the day after the election in the United States. I'm thinking, well, what are the sources of hope? Or what are the sources of inspiration? And one of the things is that our movement has the artists on our side, and I would look at history and I would defy you to show me a successful historical movement that hasn't had the artists. In some periods of time, the artists are really the only way to express resistance. I know in the penitentiary, that was also true. We were able to get away with things, making theater, making artwork, making music, that you could never confront the man that way under any other circumstances. It was a covert way to do it. But I don't know, if either one of you would like to embellish on that theme, or talk about your experience as artists and in making trouble, making good trouble, like John Lewis said.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, the art of resistance. If you look at the experience of African people's enslavement, that art sustained us. They were the songs, the spirituals that were also chants and coded messages of freedom.
Mm.
Swing Low, Sweet Chariot was a coded message of where to meet conductors on the Underground Railroad. Kumbaya songs like Kumbaya, Come This Way, Lord, were ways to work in African words into lullabies so people could remember the mother tongue. Carvings of people that looked to be like little Negroid figures were actually carvings of Orishas and of ancestors so that people could know who they were. And so when people would see slaves dancing and singing and think that they were tamed, they were nurturing their spirits, sending codes from plantation to plantation. Drumming happened at the night, encoded messages that people couldn't understood. Dancing sometimes were warrior ballets, as in capoeira, practiced by slaves who had been former people in Angola. And the art of storytelling was something that we understood from the tradition of the African griot, whose job it was to sit in the village and to sing and to drum and to dance and to pass on oral history of the tribe, current news of the tribe, and also charge the tribe with what they had to be doing in order to survive, in order to move forward. And so the art of resistance reflected that in what we did, uh, in the music, in the dance, in the photography, um, and that activism of family, of understanding the power. Mamie Till, Emmett Till's uh, mother, did not think she was an activist, but she did the most powerful thing one could do, which was to say, after my son has been beaten and mutilated, leave the coffin open, knowing that pictures would be taken, knowing that the world would see it. She used those words. She says, I want the coffin open so that the world could see what happened to my son. And it brought a focus to modern day lynching and murder that became the spark that ignited the fire of the then modern day civil rights movement. And so all through what we did, and Akinyele, my comrades Akinyele and Jihad know those images that we had coming out of the Black Arts Movement, the art of Emory Douglas and the Panther Paper, but the art that celebrated who we were, not just aspirationally as free people, but uh, but holding up in music and dance and drama that grandmother, that welfare mother, that brother who was on the corner, that potential in seeing that person be converted from a street person to a leader, to an intellectual, to someone who could understand their potential. And then for us who were in prison, there's this brother Malcolm said it best, that the penitentiary has been the university for many a black man. We had a chance to breathe, and the first thing that would happen when you would show up is that the conscious men who were there, and Tim, you know this, they would they would give you a book, right? They'd give you something to eat, they'd give you some cosmetic, and they'd go like, what you reading, what you doing? And you would hear music in the cell block at night, affirming the humanity. People would paint, discover their abilities as artists and as musicians, and they share that as inspiration, move forward. So even as I was walking down the corridors of Leavenworth, we take that walk from the cell blocks to the mess hall. There was a voice that spoke to me that said, "This can be that place. This can be that art colony for you. This can be that place of transformation for you. This can be that place where you can sharpen those other tools of revolution. Yes, we marched. Yes, we fought. Yes, we armed ourselves. But there are other ways to call the people to action and to inspire them. And so for me and for Akinyele and Jihad, the the beating drum became theater, became film, became poetry to pass on as artists and to our students as professors, teachers, and mentors.
Hmm. Jihad, do you want to? That's beautifully put. Jihad, do you want to follow that up? I know that you authored just dozens of plays and were constantly recruiting, roping people in up onto stages where dudes that never had any idea whatsoever that they wanted to be on stage, and then a whole
Yeah.
lot of others who had always imagined themselves on stage. Now they finally had the chance. So.
That had the glory, right there,
That's right.
prison auditorium. But I thank you so much, Tim. I haven't seen you in ages, and I appreciate the no hair thing.
Yeah,
And
we're
solidarity.
rocking the same look, man.
I don't know if it's by choice or did you take the clippers, but you're looking very good. And I just want to acknowledge everybody here and just some little brief comments real quickly with Denise and Rowan. I think that I want definitely supporting what Comrade Akinyele is saying about the family and that importance, because I know so many times that they use the word activists today, but revolutionaries, outside the home, and then you go back home and it's nothing reflecting what you're saying outside the house. And matter of fact, you may be the only one that's out there doing anything, and your family's apolitical and not being pulled along. And there's so many examples about that. So the building block, as Akinyele said, the family is synchronized to everything that we're doing, and it can't be left behind or ignored neither. So I respect you, Denise, sister, and brother Rowan, for what you're doing. And a comment about my comrade Jamal, real quick, is I remember that brief stint on parole. I went to New York to see Jamal, and he might remember this. And he invited me to some, I don't know, he was doing a stand-up thing or something, and there was one person at the bar, and Jamal was up there talking like there's a whole room full of people, and the person like, I said, man, this was something that you couldn't even write about. And then I go back later, one of the comrades died, and you did that performance with your troop. And that was earth thumping. So we went from this, to like Jamal had this troupe, this dance troupe, and it was so choreographed so well. I love you, brother. You said it out there. So you went from you never stopped. So I don't know if that man at the bar gave you encouragement. You took it to 10. So definitely right on to the man at the bar. You went, like that. But yeah, our work is very, very important. And just to let Sister Denise and Brother Rowan get just a real quick glimpse at when we talk about doing plays in prison, and Jamal's bear witness to this too, is that a lot of times you couldn't have a group, an unauthorized group, to practice your plays. So let's say if your play had 15 people in it, those 15 people may have never seen, there was no run through of the whole play, dress rehearsal. Two of them practiced their scene over here, 3 or 4 over here under the stairwell, the others in the cell block. And then on the day of the performance, we all come together, and that stuff was alive and popping like that. So even under these arduous conditions, we was able to do a lot. And Timmy is definitely correct. You can say a lot through your artwork. And without the confrontational aspect, everybody's in the audience from various political and philosophical views and perspectives. They're listening, and they don't feel necessarily challenged by you. They're absorbed by the performance, and the performance is always trying to invoke some type of strong emotions. That's when you hit anger, joy, sorrow, happiness, or whatever the case may be. So we really, the whole thing about revolutionary art, the painting, drawing, music, theater, it is so very important, because a lot of times the political messages that we say may actually be lost, but the art isn't. You'd be amazed, like when archaeologists dig up things and anthropologists be looking and sifting through the rolls of history, how it is the art that kind of like perseveres through it all, and kind of like sends that message about what exactly was going on there. And people value art, even in that's why it's reprehensible that even in struggles, when one takes over another, that they destroy their artwork. So, if there's any principle on the side of the opposer, other side of the fence, if you will, whoever it is, if you destroy people's art, you're really making a dig in to destroy who they are and their culture, because people value art and things of this nature, and it carries today. The writings on the wall, the hieroglyphics, everything that we see, is being carried through the art. So looking at the backgrounds, whatever we're doing, for us to keep doing it, it's a different type of challenge today in a way. Tim, and just last comment I want to make is that with the advent of the internet, if you will, and the accessibility to technology, it gives everyone access, so to speak. But it also presents a challenge as far as your uniqueness and individuality. So I know even with the music, when I was um, a kid, that you can almost name all the top artists. They, matter of fact, they're in the centerfold of and that was it. But now, I think artists, even in the music industry, like they're striving really hard to make their imprint, because there's so many people have access. So it's easy access, but now it's a whole I don't know, millions of people doing the thing. Right. So and so it leads me to make this point here, is that the art, in my humble opinion, that really perseveres amongst, particularly when we talk about our people, is the art that has the message to it. So that kind of like what kind of rises up to the top. The messages that we bring, the relevancy of it, if it's something that's totally abstract, and which this is no slight to any abstract art. If it's throwing a can of paint on a canvas and selling it for $1 million, I could never quite get that. But that was exactly about. But art that has a message is what's important for us as a people, to be able to carry on the important messages that, and oftentimes in often venues, we're not able to get across. So, all power to everybody and what they're doing, and hope that we continue that spirit, and maybe through Tim, this collaboration here, we can something in the future. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I just
I
wanted
think the real quick point
go
of what Jihad was saying, pay attention to the fact that the same Republicans and reactionaries that are at this very moment trying to suppress the vote are the same people who, when they do budget cuts, cut arts in the school programs first, and especially in our Black and Brown communities, right? They understand that power. Not, and we're talking about the power of suppressing the vote, our voices in that way. But what happens when you begin to suppress the power of expression through art? Art helps people think creatively and critically, and think about how they can be that disruptor that Brother James Baldwin talks about.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I bring a couple of threads together here. I was going to just say the thing about what you were doing in the penitentiary, Jihad, and I think what Jamal and Akinyele are now doing on the street, and also you still, Jihad, that there was the message that you brought with all of the plays that you did, all of the activities, the skits, the things that, we were doing in the communities in Lewisburg and Leavenworth. They all had a message, but the message actually was almost besides the point. The message was always clear, it was always good, it was always relevant, but the real message that you were imparting was, we can do this. And I think the way that you helped empower these young brothers in the penitentiary, that was the real lesson. It was like Paulo Freire. It was the and as educators, it's interesting how many of us now are finding ourselves in the colleges and universities or on the street as educators. But that was really what was so powerful about what you were able to do, Jihad, was you were able to show these young men their own power and introduce it to them as a concept in a way they probably had never thought of it before. And Jamal and I were talking last night. Maybe you want to share that story again, Jamal, about coming upon Jihad's theater practice. That was like
What?
with the Mexican brothers who sat in on that. I thought that was a great story.
Yeah, Jamal, tell us about this.
Well, first of all, Jihad, I'll thank you again. Jihad kind of charged me. It's real important too that we think about legacy and how things will continue when we build a program. If it's an art program, a breakfast program, that we are. There's an older brother that I knew that said, you know, I have to train my replacements. You know, and Afeni Shakur often talked about that the goal of a community organizer, in particular, she was teaching me about being a Panther, and she said the goal of the Panthers um, is not to have every black uh, person in the community become a member of the Black Panther Party. We're here to teach people the possibility of struggle through example. And if we do our jobs correctly and people are participating in their own liberation, we'll make ourselves obsolete. Um, so on that note, Brother Jihad, as he was leaving Leavenworth, looked around to see who would continue the work that he was doing politically, culturally, spiritually. And he kind of pulled me to the side saying, uh, you know, we've been doing these plays, Brother Jamal, and I know you did a little theater on the outside, so I'm looking to you to continue that. Uh, I wrote a piece, so our first rehearsal was a Black History Month thing. I think that was the charge, Jamal, that Jihad, that Black History Month was coming. And I written a piece, and we were rehearsing it, and there were only 3 or 4 brothers. They, you know, some had acted, some had, you know, hadn't. Were doing improv, and Leavenworth, like most other prisons, are segregated, and they have different parts of the yard that they're called courts. For courtyards, their section of the yards. And so uh, one of the most serious groups was the Mexican brothers, La M. And 2 of the La M brothers come to the rehearsal. And usually they do not leave their section of the yard unless they got a beef. And the way they solve their beef is to kill somebody. And these 2 brothers, Tito and Raphael, come to the rehearsal and they just sit down and fold their arms. And they are Diesel from the Way pile and hieroglyphic kind of tattoos all over their bodies. And we all think the same thing. Who they got beef with, who they here to kill. But you don't look, you don't show any nervousness or fear. So the guys are acting and they're really trying to get into it. And there's one particular brother named Tito. I'm glancing out the side of my eye and he's looking more and more upset. And after about 15 minutes, he stands up and he points right at me and he was like, "Yo, Holmes, let me talk to you." And I'm like, "Damn, it's me. I just got here. What beef did I have? You know, I don't gamble. I don't drink wine. I mean, you know, these are usually the things that get you in." And he pulls me to the side and he, as serious as could be, he was like, "Heard about what you was doing." I said, "And I had to come and check it out for myself, Holmes. And I want you to listen to me good. That guy you working with, that effing guy," I said, "he's not feeling his character." I said, "Man, well, why don't you jump in?" And he was good. And he made his voice. So I had to rewrite the play. And then a couple of the white brothers showed up, right? You know? And so before you knew it, the Black History Month play became the Black History Month play with a rainbow cast
Yes,
because people were drawn to their humanity and drawn to
yes.
that space where they could be safe and brave to say, "This is who I am," you know, even though I'm physically incarcerated, my spirit is free and I'm going to express it.
Akinyele, you had something you wanted to contribute to this about education.
Well, it won't be as funny as Jamal. That was a great story. But
That's a great story.
I, unlike my co-panelists who were political prisoners, who I all respect and as honored resistance fighters, I've never been incarcerated. Well, I haven't been in prison. I haven't been convicted of a felony, I should say that. Okay, but I had experience teaching in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and also in Coleman Federal Penitentiary in Florida It was one of the times I saw you down there, Jamal, when you came down there to speak. We did the Black History down there. But when I went there the first day, person that some of you know, Dr. Matulu Shakur was in the class. And it would be Dr. Shakur and brothers who were in their 40s and above. And then I would have young men in the class. And the young men would generally just listen. They wouldn't really participate. And so after about, a little while of that, I said, well, let me go in and let me start asking them questions. And hopefully they get engaged. It had the opposite reaction. They felt I was attacking them because I was asking them questions in the class. And so Dr. Shakur stopped me. And it wasn't another brother stopped me. He said, what are you trying to do? And I said, well, I'm trying to get everybody involved in the discussion. And they said, okay, we thought you was trying to say we were chumps, and ain't nobody in here for being a chump. And so, and then Shakur intervened, and he said, Emoja, he said, you're a pretty good professor, but he said, if you want to get these brothers engaged in a conversation, you have to come back and let's talk about hip hop. And so that's what we did. We organized a hip hop summit, and the younger brothers got very engaged in not only their performance, but we created the thing where they had to defend their lyrics and what was the intent of their lyrics and that type of thing. They were really studying and working hard. Come over the years, so same young brothers were organizing the African American history classes where they went because they got engaged, and it was a pedagogy through the art that got them engaged. So that, I think that to me, that was one of the most valuable lessons I've had as an educator. I didn't get it from a university. Well, I got it from the same university Jamal was talking about, the same University of Malcolm, right? So I had to learn from the brothers in there, and that helped me. And so, getting back to Denise and to Rowan, the art that they produce is going to be so much a contribution to us being able to educate folks. And as I said before, to document what happened, because again, if we only rely on corporate media, then it's going to be a distorted view of who was involved, who were the players. Sometimes they just rewrite the whole story.
Yeah.
And so, you all made an important contribution to us being able to tell the story.
I should have introduced Rowan because he's an actor. That's principally what his artistic practice is. So Rowan, why don't you talk about your youth theater?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, because acting and especially acting with youth that's my main love in life. And something I love that you were talking about, and I think it all ties together, is youth, the accessibility to social media, the accessibility to independent media, and the accessibility that youth have to that independent media that they are not necessarily monitored looking at. So they have, I think, which is a huge difference in this generation, is that youth have, they have TikTok, which has a bunch of news on there that are going, and all of these, Facebook or TikTok, they're going to, if you are, of liberal mind, they're going to show more of that liberal content, which I think is kind of an interesting ideology, which is why I also was really passionate about putting my photos up online, is because lots of the kids, and I'm talking about youth, I mean, I'm considered a youth because I'm only 22 to some, but youth, when it comes to like even 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, a lot of the kids I've worked with, they are so incredibly vocal on social media and media in general, more so than even I am. I have learned more about this political movement than they have. And I think that's a big, a lot of it is to do with a lot of adults. I talk to adults being older than I am. I am an adult, but there's a mentality of wanting to stay away from media, a mentality of wanting to, what you don't know is not going to hurt you kind of deal. And I think the youth movement is challenging that a lot because of media. And I think there is going to be a huge separation on education in political in modern political science because of the pushback from older generations of exploring different media outlets. I know I'm kind of going off on a rant, but that is another instigator for why my experience working with youth in theater, working with youth in theater, they're generally more open to different perspectives. But that was a huge instigator on why I felt these pictures needed to be out in the world, just because I realized that independent media is more generally accepted by the generation that is really going to create change. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because of my experience with theater and youth in general.
Absolutely. I wanted to just return for a moment to, it's still about art, but about photography and this movement that's grown up, Black Lives Matter. When I teach history of photography, I tell my classes I would love to be able to give maybe a Nobel Prize to the inventor of the cell phone camera, because in the experience of white people, it's been the cell phone camera that it's for the first time that there are a lot of white folks who finally believe what black folks have been saying about the police for about 200 years. And a lot of people still don't believe it, but at least, now the evidence, sort of the visual document, the incontrovertible the visible proof of what even progressive people only ever experience as sort of slogans. And I really vividly recall being told when I was in college, when I was Rowan's age, a couple of years ago, when I was Rowan's age. No, it was folks from the Republic of New Africa and from Reverend Daughtry's Black United Front in Brooklyn were telling white folks who wanted to be involved in the anti-racist movement. They said, y'all, you want to be of service, you need to deal with the police, and the phrases that were used is the occupying army in the black community. And I could only grasp that as a metaphor, on some level. It would seem, occupying army. Yes, it's like, powerful militant slogan kinds of stuff, and it's okay. I sort of get that, but I think the reality of the day-to-day confrontations with the police and with the structures of white supremacy in the form of the armed police presence in the black community is something that I have to say I'm still learning about and seeing through this visual evidence, as a 60-some-year-old, activist. The plethora of this evidence that is just now being brought to bear has been transformative. And I think with this moment of focus, this sharp focus that we have during COVID, now we're all sitting on looking at our cell phones, staring at all these images, and there's a political philosopher who writes about photography, Ariel Aujale, who talks about the citizenship of photography. That implies that if you are exposed to images like this, there's a contract that if you are now charged with this knowledge, you need to act on it. That there's an ethical responsibility that accrues to those who engage in those images. And I don't think that most of us are like Denise and Rowan, or those of us who have been at these demonstrations and taken our own photographs have that in mind. But I think that we are entering a new territory in image making where visual artists who are participant activists are beginning to create this sort of new terrain of implied responsibility that I think has really been generative for some of the protests that have been going on. The numbers of white people I see in the streets now is As I
Yeah,
said to
there's a lot of white
Jamal,
people.
years ago, you could have taken all of the white people in 1980 who used the term white supremacy and thought the police needed to be dealt with as an institution of repression. You could have put us all in one room in the United States, and now it's just really interesting to see how that has developed. But
Well, the
I'm
power of
wondering,
those photos, Tim,
yeah.
is that not only can people see the way the way they're framed and the way the subject reaches out to you, see what's going on, but as you described, they can see themselves in that photo.
Mm, mm, mm,
They can see a version of themselves participating,
mm.
standing up for injustice. Uh, it becomes something not only to share, but that has motivated people. We always were worried if that would be the case, right? If people would just be online activists. Back in the day, we called them armchair revolutionaries. But that translation into action, especially at a time in COVID, where you really were putting your body on the line physically, not just because of what might happen with the police, but because of that, has been a powerful thing. And it's been the power of that image. And Rowan, as you said, and the ability to get that image around the country and around the world, those images.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
Yeah,
can.
agreed.
So yeah, Denise, you mentioned earlier about the camera, whether or not you would carry a camera or not. I remember looking one time when I was over a friend of mine's house. Actually, it was Stitch. I don't know if you remember. Anyway, Tim, but it was in his bathroom. In the picture, I think it was a replication of something else, but it was the name of the picture was "Walking By," and it was just a bland picture over the toilet. With some trees in the forest, something that you really wouldn't pay attention to. But when you start to look at the picture a little closer in the forest and the trees, there was a noose hanging.
Mm.
And that just came to my mind when everybody's talking about, you capture an image, it gives you a chance to analyze. And like Jamal just said, see yourself in that picture. Whereas a lot of times things are so fleeting, you may not have the time. How many bits of information is going through our mind and so many things happen. But when you're able to recapture, go back over and look, I think this is of profound importance and significance. Like to give the person an award for the camera on your cell phone. It also, it just allows for us to expose that pink elephant in the living room. It's always been there, but now we all, oh, there it is for real. And the proof is in the pudding because that's what happened. And people begin to see now. Imagine the George Floyd murder not being captured at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
When
20
he had
years
him
ago
down,
it wouldn't have been. Yeah,
yeah,
20 years ago you would never have heard of George Floyd. You would never have heard of Breonna Taylor. You wouldn't have heard of, most of the names except as, maybe on the end of a leaflet, that would have been circulated in the Black community and among a few folks, and it would have just been a footnote, another tragic footnote,
Right.
and would have been documented elsewhere. But
I think that's also because of COVID, really, as well. I think a lot of, talking about all the white people that were out on the streets, and I think a lot of it is because people had the time, so they therefore would put more interest into going out, which is, I don't think takes anything away from the movement at all. But one thing I did want to mention real quick is I have never really been able to sit through my pictures. One thing I loved talking to you, Tim, with our interview the other day, is like, for instance, I'm not a religious person, so it was really interesting to be able to hear your perspectives. One of my images that has of a sign saying "lift" in it, and so you
right,
brought the
right.
perspective of what that can mean to someone who practices religion actively. So it was really interesting and nice to kind of ruminate over of what else people, everybody can take what they need, what they need to, what they don't want to, or what they may not be expecting to see through every single image that my mom or anyone, or I or anyone has taken. Kind of opened my mind as images again speaks 1,000, words to different people, and each word to each of those 1,000 words to each individual are going to be different.
I was
One,
thinking about just the difference in the technologies. Um, I remember 1979, I think it was, in Los Angeles, we had the case of Eula May Love, who was a woman, widow. She couldn't pay her gas bill. They sent some folks by. She ran them off, and they came back, and the LAPD shot her several times. And around her case, I can't tell you what she looked like. Now we know what Breonna Taylor looks like. With George Floyd, Trayvon Martin. So it kind of humanizes them for us in a particular type of way. So that's something that's really powerful. That a lot of us old heads criticize the technology a lot, but it has its role and it has its uses. And us beginning to tell the story and we can use it to connect people and connect people across around the world, because it's people in Europe, and I had friends in Venezuela, with the image of George Floyd, so that makes it real powerful in a way.
mm-hmm.
I had the pleasure. I know we're coming to a close, but Tim, when you and I talked last night, you reminded me of the term Ubuntu, which is we use in my theater program and Impact. But Desmond Tutu talked about it, and it is that the simple way to understand it is that I am because you are, so that everything I am, you are, everything that we both do matters. Uh, this is an important concept, and it's the other thing that art helps us do. And then uh, I had the pleasure a few days ago of being on a panel with a First Nation brother from Alaska, from the Inuit tribe. His name is Nicholas uh, Galliner, and I'm going to put his name in the chat so that we can share it. He does amazing art, from totems to sculptures uh, to exhibitions, and it talks about history. It talks about the environment. It's really powerful. And what he said that really moved me is that in his native language, in Inuit, there is no word for art.
Mm.
It is Ubuntu to them. It is part of who they are. Art is because of who they are. And that's what I think art and activism and those examples, whether we talk about the griot, whether we talk about the artivist, where we talk about that, at its core, what moves us is that it connects us, and we start to understand that we are because you are, and you are because we are.
It's so important. I think that's exactly right, and it's a great place to sort of bring this together. I know in my own teaching, I'm using that word Ubuntu. I use it in every class that I teach, and for those of us who are coming of age in a radically alienated society, when we don't see the connections, you're educated not to see the connections. You're educated not to see the implicit, intrinsic humanity of others. In fact, you're trained to see the opposite, if anything. To then the question of, well, what does art matter? Art doesn't make any difference if that's the world that you're growing up with, because art at its best is the opposite of alienation. Art is a celebration of that connection. It's as Jihad was saying before, when you're destroying another person's artwork, when you're part of a conquest, when you're when you're an imperialist or colonizing country destroying the previous inhabitants, artwork is part and parcel of destroying their identity as a culture, but it's destroying the connections. It's attacking the essential humanity. And why artists are a part of revolutionary struggle and why we're here today doing this work, having this discussion, is to celebrate that connection, to elaborate on it, and it's to have a conversation that's part of time travel. I mean, art, if you think about it, art is like, it's the object record of the consciousness of us as a species. It is Ubuntu. It's like, that's what art is. It's the actual record of our whole conversation with the ancestors. It's a record of our conversation with each other and what we're going to then, how we're going to have that conversation with those in the future who come after us. That's what we're doing together. So of course the Republicans or the fascists will attack that. Of course dictators put people into national stadiums and execute them when they are about creating revolutionary art or any kind of art for that matter. So that's why we need to keep doing what we do and be conscious of its role in our lives, in our cultural experience. And I think that's why we're all here. That's why we've been summoned to this moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even though it reflects a different culture and ethnic groups, it still crosses the lines. It just seeps right on through. The music, I mean, different countries, we can savor and enjoy other cultures' music. And that's like Jamal said, that's a connection. It's there, and art is there. People can enjoy from different cultures and learn about other people's cultures. It's just that weaving net that it kind of like brings us all together.
We have a couple of minutes left here. I wanted to just give everybody a chance to, give a final summation or perspective on what we've been doing today, or if there are particular projects that you would like people to know about, please. Akinyele, do you want to sound off on?
Well, I just want to say with Denise and Rowan's art, that they kind of captured some stuff about Black Lives Matter. Number one, there was a lot of female participation, a lot of women. One of the things I contrasted when I think of a lot of the photos of previous movements, a lot of them focus on well-known individuals and charismatic leaders, but they just got activists who were involved in the movement. And, I appreciate those elements. That's one of the things that's kind of different. Everyone says the Black Lives Matter was started by 3 women, right? But I don't, I don't know them as well as I know the image of Rap Brown or Stokely Carmichael or Huey Newton when I was coming up, right? Or Martin Luther King or Malcolm. And so I think that's something that's different about that movement, right? It's not as hierarchical. And so I don't know if that was their intention, but they captured that for me in documenting that protest to tell that story. So I just want to get that brief observation and just say I'm honored, Tim, that you asked me to be on this. I've always respected you, even though we didn't know each other like that, but I respected who you are because of the stand you made. Of course, brother, comrade Jamal, always loved and respected him. I love the humanity he shows his comrades. The last time I think I saw him, he was here in Atlanta to honor Kathleen Cleaver with some more of his comrades, the Black Panther Party. And of course, Jihad, just a steadfast worker for our people. So I'm honored to be on this with Rowan and Denise, with y'all. And thank you. This has been a blessing to participate in this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I chime in there with you too, my comrade Akinyele, just to see everybody. And I just hope that in spite of the COVID-19 that we're able to maintain and continue with our own initiatives and our aspirations and our dreams and utilizing art Akinyele teaching and Jamal with Impact. I don't know. That was now that I'm thinking about it, when I saw you that time, that was when you did that fantastic, outstanding thing. That was when Setawayo, his memorial in New York, Michael Tabor.
Hmm.
Yeah, that had to be over 10 years ago. I know that. But anyway, that, and whatever we have going on, I know there's ups and downs with it, and it seems like sometimes this lesson, it seems like sometimes when things are not necessarily happening is when other people may be very well noticing, and how life is a lot of times when you're long gone, you'll be picking it. This is Jamal, and sometimes and have faith that that's how it happens a lot of times. With what you're teaching, Akinyele, the pictures that Denise and Rowan are taking, and working with the youth, and Tim, your music, and maybe we can do something. I know talking with you the other day was really motivating for me, but you never know when it seems like it's really not that much happening. I mean, it's 330 million people in the United States. There's a lot of different things going on. You think that, and, it may be just later when somebody comes along and unearths something that is powerful and profound, is just what they were looking for. And it was just that program that Jamal thought really wasn't hopping and popping, that people pulled out the script for that. And there it is. So I just want to end on that and saluting everybody. And thank you, Tim, for inviting me.
Thank you. I got big plans for you, Jamal. Jihad, I have lots of big plans for you. I've got plans for everybody, but you're going to be on the stage sooner than you think.
I don't mind that. I got some good ideas.
I know you don't. Denise,
we all can fit right into them things too. I know.
I know, right? Very easy.
I have an idea of time. Well, I'm not gonna let it out now. But if I told you right now, I bet your grades come undone, Jamal. Because it'd be just that powerful. I mean, you'll see it. It's kind of like a satire humor thing, but I can see us all working on something like that.
I see it all. I'm so glad to see everybody, and my ongoing love and respect for for my comrades, for Akinyele, for Jihad, for Tim, Denise, and Ronan. It was great to meet you. I want to stay in touch. And when Tim says it, Tim, thank you for bringing us together for this. Tim will do it. Tim edited a book. Tim, weren't you still inside when we did Hauling Up the Morning?
Oh yeah,
that book of gathering poetry and writings from people who have been incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, and that idea of mobilizing art and activism is something that Tim does and that he lives by. So thank you for that and for that experience of of that. So I'll share a quick piece that I shared when we had our conversation. A poem about creativity and activism. The time has come for riffs and revelations, for way out trips to inner space. If truth is one, if truth is really one, then it must be our perspectives that are fragmented. The journeys we make in search of unblemished realness reveal that much of the rest is a lie. And if love is to transform and to be transformed, then creativity must be the child of a most perfect union. We may not have all of the answers, but at least let's attempt to understand the questions through truth-filled endeavors that build large creative fires, or maybe just a flame. But nevertheless, let's keep trying.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all. Denise, do you have any last words? Any things you'd like to contribute?
I wonder where my kid went, but other than that,
no, he's working. I think. Yeah, he was. He was able to spare us an hour from his work.
Yeah.
I appreciate
it. I'd like to say I'm just really, really honored to be in the presence of you all. And when the protests were first happening, my news feed was, I was looking at the New York Times a lot, and the photographs that I saw were very compelling and very right. I saw stuff that I wish that I had taken. And I actually did submit my photos to the stock agency that I take stock photos for, but they have their own stringers, of course. But so the point being that I have this amazing, Tim, you've given me this amazing outlet or this amazing opportunity to get my photographs out, and I had no intention of them going anywhere really. So this is like extra blessing. And a photographer, I don't really create. I'm a creative, all right, but the photograph is just is a snap. Literally, you capture a moment, and it's a capturing of a thing. And I don't take a piece of raw clay and sculpt anything, or it's not even the blank paper that I put words on. That it doesn't really evolve except for in the eyes of the viewer, or that's what maybe what brings it alive, or what makes it fluid, makes it malleable, or makes it changeable, is that different people are looking at it. Because really a photograph, I feel like I don't create anything. It's my perspective and my camera and my eye, okay, but it's not it's a creation of a sort, but it captures something, which is important, of course. But so now I'm rambling, but thank you so much. I'm really excited that our images are reaching who they are reaching. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say thank you to everybody. I'm going to end the stream here and with a slideshow of the images from Denise and Rowan and Ray, and I'm just going to run some of your images. And thank you, Akinyele, thank you, Denise, thank you, Jamal, thank you, Brother Jihad. And the good news with this happening is that it keeps evolving and we keep adding to it. And so there are going to be other iterations of this. And so you're not off the hook yet. So you're going to you'll be hearing from me soon. So
Looking forward, brother.
great. I'm really, really deeply indebted to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right. Peace.
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 Okay, a last thank you also from me from Munich while you're running that slideshow, Tim. Thank you all so much for putting on this very interesting and amazing and important discussion. We're very happy that you have participated, or you're still participating in the Fire 1,000 Poems project. And also, on a last note, if anybody else is interested, there are also longer talks that Tim has done with a few of the photographers and activists on the project's website, fire1000poems.com. On that note, again, thank you so much, and good day, good evening. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Mhm. Mm.
And I think the feed is over. I think we're all done.